Hi, my name is Gwen Hess, and I am a Senior Technical Trainer with Uninet University, and I'd like to welcome all of you today to our webinar on our troubleshooting series. Today's topic is timesheets, and I'm joined today by Kim, who's with our Customer Success team. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Gwen. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Kim Fieser. I'm part of the Customer Success Management team at Uninet, and I will be fielding your questions. I hope you enjoy our webinar.
Thanks, Kim. Glad to have you with us today on this. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, this webinar is a part of our troubleshooting series, and today we're looking at timesheets and the things that people might need to troubleshoot in regards to their timesheets. Before we get started on the content of this webinar, I just wanted to go over with you a few little logistics. Every now and then, GoToWebinar will kind of give you a message saying that you might be having some difficulty with your internet audio or something. It's kind of rare, but it does happen from time to time. But if you do have any sort of an issue with the GoToWebinar connection, just drop off and then reconnect, because it will work and bring you right back into the webinar. So let's talk about troubleshooting our timesheets. So, you know, a lot of times there are different questions that we might have, like, you know, I'm in my timesheet and I need to enter time to a particular project or task, but I don't see it available on my my timesheet. Like, where's task number 3? That's the one I'm working on. Sometimes we might be at that point where we got to get our timesheet submitted, and there's something that comes up and says you can't submit yet. There's an error that's got to be taken care of. Well, what do we do so that we make sure that we can get our timesheet in and submitted in a timely fashion? And sometimes we might see this, I can't even save it or submit it because there's a comment that is required. Well, how do I enter comments? Why do I need to have a comment that's entered there? You know, I might just be ready to chill on vacation. I've got my countdown to vacation going, and how does that time get entered when I'm on a vacation? Does Uninet automatically enter that? I mean, I've got an approved leave request. We'll take a look at that as well, because ultimately we just want to make sure our timesheet gets approved. So let's take a look at each of these different items that we might encounter as we're trying to get our time entered, submitted, and get it approved. Let's look first at this thought that we may not have a project or task on our timesheet that we were expecting. So when that happens, there are a couple of things that you can do yourself before you're going to your project manager or your Uninet administrator. So one of the first things is at the bottom of your timesheet, there are these buttons that you see all the time. You're very familiar with your Save and Submit, but there's also a My Projects button. Now, you may have an assignment to a project, the one that you're expecting, and it may just be that it is listed in the left-hand side of this double list box. You may have at one point moved it over there so that you would have fewer items in your drop-down. So if that's the case, all you have to do is highlight the one that you need to bring over, click the double right arrow, and it'll move it over to the right box. You click Save, and then you can go back to your timesheet. So that's one way to be able to go ahead and sort of self-serve if you have that assignment that's over here on the left-hand side for you. But if that's not the case, you might say, let me run a report and see if I actually have an assignment here that should be available for me. And you can do that by running a user schedule details report. You'll see this, any user can run this report. You're running it against your own project, your own assignments. So when you go to that, you have a criteria screen. And so I'm just going to look at what I have as this current month, because I'm entering time on this month, and I want to make sure to see if I have an assignment for that one that I expect. So I'm going to say run it for this current month. Report on assignments is already clicked by default. And so when I run this report, I can see, there's that task number 3 that I expected to see. I do have an assignment to it. But here's the kicker. My assignment doesn't start until next Monday. So because the begin date is not yet been reached, that's why I don't have the ability to enter that on my timesheet. So it's at this point that we would go to our project manager or to our UniNet admin and ask, is this the correct begin date? If it is, I can't enter time to it for my work this week. So they might instruct you to put your time against a different project with a particular note, or they may say, oh yes, we put the wrong date on that, and they could open it up and then it would be available to you. But what if you've looked at the listing of your My Projects and you've looked at the report and you still can't find it? Well, that can just really make it where you just want to pull your hair out. And we really don't want you to get to the point that you're just pulling your hair out. It would be at this point in time that you would have to say, let me go and talk with my PM or my UniNet administrator. And the wonderful thing is that your UniNet administrator has this nice little 12 steps that they can go through to determine why isn't a project appearing on their timesheet. This is actually in our Knowledge Center. So that's available to anyone to go out and read up on this information at kc.uninet.com. And you can do a search to find this. So your admin could go in and figure out why you're not able to see that project or task that you were expecting to enter time against. So the next thing that we sometimes encounter as we're trying to figure out how we're going to submit our timesheet is we sometimes get a message at the top that says there were errors detected and you cannot submit, and sometimes you get this in saying that you cannot even save until those errors are corrected. So when you see that, it's like, well, what do I do? Well, the first thing is, let's just keep calm and let's follow the directions. Because when we have an error like this, right up in that box, it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. In this case, they needed to put a time in, time out sort of entry. You might see a message saying that you need to ensure that a certain number of hours are put in for the day. It all really depends on what your particular UniNet implementation is set up to require. And those are based upon your internal business rules as well as the contracts that you're working on. So just remember, look at the instructions, keep calm, follow the directions.
That was easy.
So the next thing that sometimes we come across is a different message in the box up at the top that tells you that comments must be entered, and you can't save or submit until that you have entered comments. Well, if you've never entered comments before on your timesheet, you'll wonder, well, how do I go about doing that? Because it tells me that on this particular project, PS2 upgrade, and I see that's my second row here for my task requirements, that for the date for 12, I need to enter comments. So we know that it's going to involve this cell on our timesheet. So when we actually put our cursor into that cell, there's a little red line that appears, because as you're entering your time, you've seen this where the cell you're in, there's a red line there. That red line corresponds to the particular comment that you would put into your free-form text box down here. So when we put that comment in, that says this cell, these are the comments that go with it. And just as the message up here tells us, this particular project requires comments, because sometimes the contracts that we're working on will require that we enter comments. And that's the reason why it's been set up in that fashion, because we need to enter comments for that particular project. And once we've done that and we hit save, our error message at the top goes away, and we have another visual cue on our timesheet, and that's this little green arrow in the, little green triangle in the upper right of that cell on our timesheet. That's a visual cue that tells us that that cell has a comment associated to it. So if we were to navigate away from that cell, we would still see that little green triangle, and we would know if we wanted to read what that comment was, we could just come back, place our cursor in this cell on our timesheet, and be able to see the corresponding comment. But sometimes we see a slightly different type of comment or change reason that we need to enter. If your company needs to be DCAA compliant, one of the things that you must have turned on is the audit trail. Some companies also turn that on even if they don't have to be DCAA compliant. But with that, it means that if you've modified information in a timesheet cell, maybe you've changed the hours or you've added to them, then you have to say what is the reason for that change. So when you see this screen, all you have to do is to click on that drop down on the change reason and pick whatever is your appropriate reason and then hit save. If I were, for example, to pick entry issue, when I clicked on that, there would be a corresponding value that would show up in this text box area. Grayed out, I can't add to it, but then I could hit save. If, however, in this listing there is not a change reason that is valid for why you had to make that change, you might have the ability to click on Other. Again, it depends upon how your setup was for your particular Uninet instance. But if you click on the Other, then this free-form text box becomes available to you. And so you can then type in here the reason for your change, and you can hit save. It's vacation time. You have put in your leave request and you have been approved, and so now you are ready for vacation. So vacation's coming up next week. I don't really have to think about anything in regards to that. It's going to get entered on my timesheet, right? Well, it's not automatically entered. So let's take a look at this. In this case, we've got Charlie Gibson, and I've run a leave request status report. So we see he is scheduled to be on vacation next week. But what he needs to do is he does need to go in and enter next week's time before he leaves to be gone all next week. The approved leave request information will show up at the top of the timesheet. However, it does not do anything to populate the timesheet, because you may or may not actually take all of the hours that you have requested on your leave request. You may have had something to come up that you might have to delay that vacation, or you may actually end up expanding that and taking longer time. But it is not going to populate the timesheet for you. That is certainly something that the DCAA auditors would not allow, would be to have this type of pre-population. However, what is allowed is for you to go into the future on these type of leave projects and go ahead and enter your time and submit it. So Charlie can go ahead and this week enter his time in for his vacation next week and go ahead and submit it so that he will be in full compliance with when he has to have that timesheet entered, so he can go off on his vacation and enjoy a beverage and a pineapple with an umbrella. Another thing that we might want to know is, what's the status of my timesheet? Has it been approved? So what we can do in order to see that is we can run a timesheet status report. This is available in the user report section to any timesheet user, and you can run this report to be able to see what is the status of your timesheet. So when we select that report, we're taken to our criteria screen, and we probably just want to look at all these various statuses to see what our timesheet that we just submitted is in. We would select the particular time period. I'm actually going to run it for my current period. You have two selections in the relative time period here, either the current or the previous one. If you really wanted to look further back for something in the past, you could select the radio button for a specific time period, and then those would be available for you to select out of this box. But let's take a look at it not from a summary view perspective, which that's the radio button that is selected by default. Let's look at it from a detail view, and let's look at the approval history. When we do that, we'll see a summarization at the top of our page that when the report returns to us, we see immediately what that status is. But because we asked for timesheet details, one, we actually get this view of what the timesheet looks like. And because we selected approval history, we also see what happened along the way. So here we see that Tom, who's our manager, our supervisor, has disapproved the timesheet, and in the comment section it says, please correct your hours. So this would have also been received by Diane via an email notification out of Uninet as well. So Diane needs to go back into her timesheet and correct it so that she can then submit it again. Let's take a look at another timesheet status. This one is for Bob. Bob has submitted his timesheet, and so it's not yet approved, but he can see under the pending approval section who this timesheet is waiting on approval from. So he has a project level approver on a particular project he's working on, so Charlie's got to approve it, as well as his supervisor Tom needs to approve it. So it needs both of these approvals before that it can become a completed or approved timesheet. So those are some of the most common troubleshooting items that we encounter. So Kim, do we have any questions that have come in through the chat that we should address before I go into Uninet and show some of these things that we've looked at on the PowerPoint?
Gwen, yes, we do have a question. You almost were answering it while you're going through it, but the question was, our employees said they didn't know that their timesheets were rejected. Does the system automatically send a user a message when their timesheet is being rejected by their time approver? They were wondering where do they turn on the email notice?
Oh, that's a great question. And in fact, let me just go ahead and go over into Uninet and let's take a look at where we would look at that. So I've got my Uninet up here, but for an end user, if they would look at their preferences, and I'm just going to open this in a new tab so I can keep my other tabs open here. My system's running a little bit slow today. Let me pull that up. Okay, so there is a preferences down here on, there are several of them in regards to receiving email notifications. So they should be receiving timesheet email notifications if they look at the time tab, and expense notifications if they look at the expense, even though we're not talking about expenses today. But this is where they would see information about having these checked. Now, I will say that some customers within their implementation of Uninet have hidden these tabs from their end users because they specifically did not want someone to be able to uncheck this ability to receive email notifications. So yes, you should, when you have a timesheet that has been disapproved, you should be receiving an email regarding that. So if you're not, two things that I would say that you need to look for. One, do you have some sort of spam filter set up that might be taking those emails and putting them into a spam folder, or a clutter folder, or something that you might need to be go and look at them and set up a rule so that they don't go into that spam or clutter folder. If they are not going into something like that, then you probably do want to talk with your Uninet admin just to ensure that your settings are all correct and that there's not something going on where that they have a setting that was not allowing those to be generated out. Are there any other questions out there, Kim, before we move on within the system?
That's what we have right now. You can move on and do your system.
Okay, great. What I wanted to do is just kind of step through each of these scenarios that we had looked at as a part of the PowerPoint presentation, of coming in here and, if I didn't see a particular project or task that I wanted, just showing that My Projects item down here would allow us to look and see the available projects and tasks that we had that aren't showing up in our drop-down. Because everything is on the right hand of the stubble list box here, everything that's on the right hand would be those things that we would see in our drop-downs. But if we had something over, say, on the left-hand side that we expected to see but we didn't, we could just select it, move it over to the right-hand box, and I have a visual cue that I've moved it because there's a little asterisk beside it. And once I hit save, that asterisk will go away. And now I know that I've saved that over, and I could return back to my timesheet and now select it as to put my time against. So that's one of the things that we wanted to point out. The other thing was, again, running that user schedule details report to be able to see, do I have assignments to what I was expecting to see on my timesheet? Because it could be that we don't have an assignment on something. So again, I'm just selected to look at my current month here. There is a drop down of relative date ranges that you can just let the system pick from there for you without having to put in something specific if you didn't want to. So I'm going to look at my current month, reporting on my assignments, and when I run this report, then I see the current assignments that I have. And just like I was showing in our example, we might find that we have something that has a begin date into the future. And so that could be that maybe this was a fat finger when the assignment entry was made. Maybe it was supposed to have been, April 4th that you were allowed to start working on it. It just inadvertently was typed in incorrectly. Or it could be that work that you're doing on that project prior to this date actually has to go to a different project and task. And of course, your project manager or the unit administrator would be able to assist you with getting the correct assignment or instructing you where to put your time. Again, you might have something that when you're trying to do a submit or a save, you'll get an error. And again, the box will tell you what you need to do. In this case, it says that they've reported fewer than 8 hours on the 12th. They've not done any entry on that, so it was expecting an entry to be done. So let's just put that there, put 8 hours on that. And that they've reported 1 hour more than the standard 8 hours for a particular day. And that if indeed they had worked that, then they must put that to an overtime code. So let's just assume that that was an incorrect entry and it should have been an 8 instead of a 9. So by following the information that was up here, I do have the audit trail on, so I'm just going to say if this was an entry issue and save. And now my error has gone away from the top. Again, don't worry so much when you see that pop up. Just follow the instructions that were in that box. They'll lead you to what you need to do. This is one where comments are required. It says we need those for the 412 entry because this project is requiring comments. Again, I just navigate to the cell. I put in the comment and save. And so now I'm good. My error has gone away. I see my little green, my little green triangle in the upper right corner. And again, when I click into that, I see the comment that goes right along with that. I see that I have comments on this day and on this day as well. So again, by navigating just to that cell, I'll see what are the comments that go along with that particular entry. On this one, I see that approved leave request at the top for a vacation that's coming up. I've actually navigated to the time into the future when this May 1st through the 3rd is happening. So I'm allowed to go ahead and put my time in advance on leave projects so that I have those out there so I don't have to worry about missing a time frame in which I would get an email notification saying maybe that I had not entered time on that date. For leave projects, I can enter that time into the future. And then sort of the last thing is actually being able to go and look at a timesheet status. Now, on the examples I was showing was from an end user perspective. So you could come down here and look at a user report on the timesheet status just so I get a little bit more information, and I am logged in as a administrator. I'm going to look at this people report timesheet status up here, and I'm going to just go ahead and say let me look for a particular period. I'm going to look at the previous period, and again, I'm looking at pretty much any status that's sort of a current one up there. I could say, let me see the detail in the approval history. And then when I run this report, it will give you this little pop-up saying that it's complete. All you have to do is click the OK. And now I'm seeing for this listing of people all their statuses. So, for example, Chris Berman has got a submitted timesheet, and it's waiting on approval by Charlie Gibson and Tom Brokaw. And then I also see that I've got Peyton Manning and Elizabeth Vargas and George Washington who have also submitted, and theirs are waiting on Tom Brokaw. Other ones that have already been completely approved and are now in a lock status, obviously I don't see anything over here on the pending approvals because they've been fully approved. So that's our little walkthrough of these different items that we saw first in our PowerPoints, and now we've seen how they are shown in the system. Kim, do we have any more questions?
Yes, Gwen, we have two questions. We have a follow-up question to the email notifications. One of our customers went through the process and they are an admin. They see that the box is checked, but they're still not getting those email notifications. Could you suggest where she should check?
Sure thing. I'd be happy to do that. So let's, and again, these are only things you would see if you were an admin. So I'm going to go here into admin setup, where all good things are set up that we might need in our system. I'm going to look here under email notifications. Now, you do have the ability to inactivate notifications, so I would suggest you come and take a look and see if the timesheet manager disapproved notification has perhaps been inactivated. You would want to have this blue check over here, and this says that it's triggered when a timesheet is disapproved by a manager. So any of your notifications that would be triggered by the system, you do have the capability to inactivate them. Just make sure that the ones that you want to be sent out are activated. That would be the first place that I would look. The second place that an admin would look is under admin properties and under the system setting, making sure that your email is enabled. If you are receiving other emails out of Uninet, then that would be enabled. But if this is checked and the emails are enabled and you still aren't receiving emails out of your system, then I would suggest that you call our support desk and have them take a look at your settings and just make sure that you have everything set as it needs to be. There are sometimes certain email settings within like your Outlook that are set incorrectly. So you might, if the person that's the Uninet admin isn't available to get to your Outlook settings globally, then you might need to get that other person within your own company on the phone with our support team as well. And they can troubleshoot that with you and get you up and running.
Great, Gwen. She found it. Thank you so much. I do have two more questions.
Great.
Okay, one question is there a way to see all my timesheet comments in one report?
All of your timesheet comments in one report. Well, let's see. If we are an end user, because I'm going to look at it from that perspective, and if I'm looking, let's see, at my time details report, we can say that we'd like to show comments on this one. And so I could run a report. Let me see if this particular user has stuff there. Yes, so they could run this, and then you see right here are the comments. So that's the timesheet details report, or the time details rather, sorry.
Okay, fantastic. And I have one more question. The last question I have for you is regarding the user schedule details report. One of our customers is having something strange. When they run the user schedule details report, not all of their project tasks show up. Can you help troubleshoot that?
Okay, well, one of the things that might be going on is when we run this, I'm just going to go ahead and run this again. So these are the ones where I have a particular assignment in here, and it could be that the assignment that they have is one that's been made like to an entire organization, so it wouldn't show up on this report because that's an organizational type of assignment as opposed to it being an assignment to a particular individual. over that. The other thing too is if we're looking at our criteria, we might not be including something that has the right time frame within it as well. Let's say that something she was expecting to see in there, maybe actually the date ended last month, and if she's looking at the current month, she wouldn't see it listed there. So it really kind of depends upon was the assignment made on an individual basis as opposed to maybe at an organizational level, or maybe there is a time frame within the criteria that she's utilizing as well. And if she's not seeing the results still that she's expecting, then I would, she could talk with her own UNINET administrator within her system, or everybody has access to our help over at the top, right underneath of the preferences. And if we click on that and we come into our help, you can kind of drill your way down by where you're at. I think it's kind of the easiest way. So I'm going to click on UNINET menu and go to reports, and I see that report dashboard there. And then I could go to user reports, and all those reports are listed there. So I could come here and click on that schedule detail, and now I can see that criteria page. I can see specific information of looking at each of those different fields that are a part of this criteria. I can, see what the output should look like. But as I'm opening, up this information here to look at these field descriptions, like performance period, I might also get some indication here as to why maybe I'm not seeing what I was anticipating, because maybe I've just not selected the right criteria.
Okay, great, Gwen. Those are all the questions that I have on my end.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. Well, I will go ahead and go back over to my presentation for just a moment here. Of course, anytime that you need to contact our support team, they're available at support@uninet.com, or you can reach them at that number. They are staffed live from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, and you can email them or call them. They are very responsive to getting back to messages and emails very quickly. And this has been a recorded webinar. It will be available on our Knowledge Center, and so it'll be out there in a few days. Usually within a week we'll have it out there. And of course, if you have any other questions in regards to this topic or any topic, please send those questions to csm@uninet.com. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been my pleasure to share this information with you, and I look forward to maybe meeting you all at a networking event, the conference, or in one of our UNINET University classes. Thank you for your attendance today, and have a great rest of the day.